Problem Reaction Solution Network. I'm Nate.
I'm Jim.
All right. And today we have a couple guests. Guys, it's been a while since we've been doing a podcast. We took off for the summer. It was a great summer, very beautiful, up in the northern woods of Minnesota here. And today we have the longtime running editor of Problem Reaction Solution Network, Jamal. Very beautiful. As of yesterday, he was the longtime running editor. Anyways, and so Jamal right here on the end, he's in the band Emergent. And how's things going with that, man?
We have some new developments, but I don't know if I can break those just yet.
Right.
It's just too soon.
That's all right. That's all right. Maybe next broadcast you'll be able to break some stuff.
Hopefully.
And we also have the new analyst of the Problem Reaction Solution Network, my cousin Leif. Both Jamal and Leif are returning guests as well. If you've listened to past episodes, we've had them on talk about many different fascinating topics. And Leif, how are you doing?
Pretty darn good.
Good. All right, cool. We're also planning on, we should be having Michael Shanklin from Statism is Slavery joining us shortly. We'll see what happens there. And otherwise, today, guys, we're going to be talking about the election. It is Sunday, November 5th, November 6th, and we're going to be talking about the election. If you're not watching the football game, you can be watching us live right now on YouTube. And it looks like we have Michael Shanklin joining us here soon enough. And so anyway, if you are watching football, maybe throw in one earbud and listen to us on the other ear. And we got some good stuff to talk about today. We're going to be talking election in 2 days. We'll be voting for our new leader. We'll be, well, I won't be voting, but other people will be voting. Most other people will be voting for this election process. And it's going to be very interesting. We might talk a little foreign policy as well and how it all relates to what might come out of this election process for either candidate. How the foreign policy for the future is going to be determined by either candidate and the special interests and big money on either side. So, Jim, what do you think? Where are we at today? I want to start off with you and me as the guys who started this podcast together. What do you think about this? First of all, are you voting, and who are you voting for? I'm just going to be frank and ask you.
I am voting, and I'm voting for myself for president.
That's good. That's
and downstream ticket, I have no idea who the hell I'm voting for just yet.
Are you going to vote for Jason Lewis in the second district here?
I have considered it.
Okay. I'm not voting at all this year. I've voted my whole adult life. I'm now 32, but this year I'm not voting. I plan to again. I'd just like to do it in a different system. It might be a while before that happens, but I'd like to vote for Jason Lewis if they're in Minnesota and you know who Jason Lewis is. You should look into him. He's running for, I believe it's the CD2 in 2nd Congressional District in Minnesota here, and he's definitely, I think, a good choice. But anyway, Leif, let's ask you, are you planning on voting this year?
Absolutely. I actually vote every day of my life. And when I say that, I mean that I spend money, and I try to spend it on the things that I want. So I don't buy from Walmart or most corporations because I consider that a vote for slavery. I consider that a vote for ending small businesses. You know?
Sure. Yeah.
I am not going to vote in the presidential election. Probably not for anything local either, although I do believe that that is one place you can sometimes get good people in that can affect things.
Yeah.
But I try to always tell people your dollars are your biggest vote. And if you want to pay for your own slavery, you want to pay for this system to continue, then spend it, wherever. Spend it on the biggest corporations that are enslaving us. But if you want to enrich your own community, you want to keep the money that you make in your community, well then spend it there.
Well, and I think it's important we define, I want anybody that's listening, any audience members, that especially if you're a new listener and you're not quite familiar with voluntarism and anarcho-capitalism and everything that goes along with that. There's a lot into it. Please Google it if you're not familiar with it. it's big corporations is one thing, but we gotta keep in mind and stress the fact that it is they're in bed with government. Government enables them. Government is the reason why monopolies, coercive monopolies, are the way that we are enslaved. If we have market monopolies, we can have a whole different system. We can have a whole different system, and it would be a lot brighter, a lot more of a bright future than what we have in our current paradigm. So that's something I think we got to stress. I just like to mention that when anybody brings up the corporations thing, we got to keep that in mind. We got to stress the fact that the reason why we're in the situation we're in is because government allows and enables these coercive monopolies.
Yeah, many of these high up business groups, they're there because of the government helping them.
Right.
It's not just that they're that good and that they're that well-run business.
Right. So Jamal, let me ask you: are you voting this year?
I do plan to vote this year, but I do find myself in a really hard spot. I'm not one to vote two-party line ever. I consider myself a libertarian. However, while I do like Gary Johnson for some things, there's some things that it's clear that he's not really a libertarian. And I know, it makes me wonder if we settle for candidates that are less than what we believe they should be. Like, for instance, the Libertarian Party, are we going to turn them into the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Because, it's clear that those two sides don't keep their own people accountable, and they'll overlook some things as long as they get some of the things they want. I really don't like the idea of turning the Libertarian Party into that, which I kind of already feel like it is when we nominate somebody like Gary Johnson. But I do think he's the better of the choices. And I don't believe he's being investigated criminally for anything, so that's a good sign. But we still have a few days to figure this out, and it's something I'm thinking about. I'm not quite sure yet what I'm going to do.
Okay. Right on. Well, that's what we were wondering. I will, when we get Mike on, if Mike's going to be joining us shortly, I will try to, I won't try. I'm sorry. I will ask him the same thing. If he's voting and who he's voting for. And again, that's where we're at here. I think it's just one of those paradigm shifts that we're facing. Some people are feeling it. Some people are just feeling it. Some people are actually really, I hate to use the term waking up. I would prefer to use the term actually getting out of bed. There's so many people that have quote unquote woken up, right? But I like to use the term, well, if you're awake, then get out of bed and really realize, go the extra step and realize where we're at today. And Jim, I mean, if you think about this election, it is literally one of the craziest of all time. And you can go back in history 100 years ago and before that. I mean, there were duels and there's some pretty crazy elections that happened throughout history. But this one here, because of the internet and because of how connected everybody is, and because of all these leaks that are coming out, WikiLeaks, Project Veritas, all this other stuff is literally turning it into not only a circus, America's Next Top President, crazy sideshow, but it's literally, I believe, brainwashing the people on such a mass. It's like almost there, and I don't want to go down the conspiracy realm, but it's really clear to see every election cycle, more and more people get riled up, and more people come out in droves because of the media. The media propagates this cycle of not only fear, but thinking that it's so important to get out the vote. Voting really mattered and really had an impact. The media and the politicians would be so eager to promote it, right?
It'd probably be illegal.
Right. Well, I mean, what do you think?
Well, there's that, and then you got people that are just just like actively ignoring some of the stuff that's coming out.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And you got that on both sides.
Yep.
It's not just the people ignoring what's coming out with WikiLeaks and Hillary, but there's stuff that's coming out with Trump, and then you got people that are solidly on the Trump train, and they're not jumping off no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And so it's like they're trying to ignore this stuff, and they try and discredit alternative media, and they try and discredit different blogs, different websites, try and discredit actual stuff that's coming out with WikiLeaks, discrediting mainstream media, which hasn't been credible for a long time, but still, it is a source.
Well, let's look at that real quick. I pulled some stuff up here just to look at a couple headlines. This is just on Google, or I just typed in election polls. CBS News, new polls, Hillary Clinton heads into election day with small lead nationally. New York Times presidential election, new poll gives Hillary Clinton a modest lead over Donald. Huffington Post, Nate Silver is unskewing polls, all of them in Trump's direction. Right there, okay, so let's look at that for a second. Nate Silver, who is a very predominant, well-known, well-reputable source for getting good information out there as far as real poll numbers, and some say he's not, some say he is. I think there's a little bit of proof on each side, but it says right here, Huffington Post, Nate Silver is unskewing polls, all of them in Trump's direction. And I've seen so much stuff on Facebook and Twitter and everything else pointing in the direction that overwhelmingly huge numbers are for Trump. But there's so many people that are talking about how Hillary is still going to win. But so let's say Trump wins the popular vote but doesn't win the Electoral College. Are people going to flip out? Are people going to go crazy? I mean, the right wing, not the right wing neocons, but the right wing super patriots, are they going to go crazy?
I think they can tweak the numbers just enough to make it seem legitimate.
Are they going to go crazy?
I do believe there'll be some backlash or fallout from this campaign, regardless of how it turns out. I think we'll have riots either way. We'll have some major news stories about things getting on the hand.
And that's something I think we got to be aware of what we're saying too. If because I kind of agree to a certain extent. I think that there might be either way, whoever wins, there might be some backlash and people, very ignorant people, go out and do something stupid, whether it's rioting or some sort of civil unrest. But I won't be surprised if it doesn't happen either. I won't be surprised if we don't have anything that really happens from it. A lot of people are so docile and dumbed down and content. And a lot of people were really against Obama, really against Obama, the right-wing super patriots, so to speak. And they nothing happened there, nothing, no one ever did anything, even though it's very clear that.
Can I stop you for a
yes,
second?
yes.
What's a right-wing super patriot?
Well, you got a lot of people who have
that nickname that you
it's actually
Probably the constitutionalist-minded people, right?
Sure, right. That's exactly right. The constitutionalist-minded people who don't believe in, they don't agree, they don't like corruption, and they're actually good people for the most part, but they're probably ignorant to the fact that they're slaves under statism. But they still believe in the Constitution, and it's an end-all, be-all, right? Even though it's a 240-year-old document, 30-year-old document that's just whatever. We can talk about that on a different show. So you got the right-wing neocons who have that mindset, even if they're not a part of the establishment. There's a lot of people that believe that the neocon attitude and mindset of war could be a good thing.
Yeah, we do it the biggest military.
Right, if we do it in the right way. And then you have the right wing super patriots who are, the oath keepers, the people who are we're going to hold the Constitution super dear. That's it. which is fine. That's great. And most of those people are good people for the most part. But I just like to look at the fact that, you know, we're so docile right now in this country. People are having a really hard time understanding that real change comes from starting from the bottom up, and it's cliche, but grassroots, actual farmers markets, making connections and networking with these local groups and creating freedom cells. If you want to know more about that, look at a Corbett report on James Corbett. It's really good on YouTube. Check his stuff out. He talks about freedom cells, and they've done plenty of reports about solutions that we can accomplish and we can do on a local level with people. And again, freedom cells. Check it out. It's a very interesting concept. Leif, what do you think as far as this election goes? Do you really think that they're gonna keep this momentum going with this idea of keeping people as docile as they are? And I think that our financial situation is in such horrible shape, and it's so unstable right now, it's such a house of cards, that it might happen in the next couple of years where we have a financial crisis that really makes a lot of people hurt. And that hurt could come in many different ways. But we were talking earlier last night, you were saying that you think it's going to go on for a little bit longer. You think that these elections aren't going to get exposed for the way what's going on, especially with WikiLeaks and everything else. Maybe the next election cycle, people really wake up if it's the right and the left being exposed in the same ways, you know, with the corruption and the connections and special interests. I mean, what do you think? You think it's going to go on longer? Or you think that this paradigm shift that is taking place is going to actually happen sooner than later?
I think there's a lot of people waking up right now, no question about that. But there's so many people that are just still doing whatever. They're comfortable and they're also scared. You know, so as long as that kind of thing keeps going on, where everybody's refrigerators running and their TVs still plays the BS every night, they're gonna sit right down on their couch and watch it. And they'll eagerly wait for the next development. You know, right. So I think that will keep going on for the most part. But the people that are rising up and catching on to this kind of stuff, they're not gonna forget it, and the information is out there. If people really want to look, they can find a lot of very damning evidence for each side. If you believe in one of the two parties, you got to realize that they are corrupt criminals. That's how they have gotten to where they are.
Right. Yep.
I'm pretty concerned that after this election, and this has been one of my biggest beefs, is that, you know, each side doesn't really hold their own political side accountable. Instead, they kind of circle the wagon to protect those candidates, even though they are doing something wrong. My concern is, after this election, those people who are defending Hillary or defending Trump, and whoever wins that, those people will go back to sleep. Sure, they'll go back to the old way of, I'm going to ignore anything that comes out about my candidate. We won, everybody else needs to shut up, kind of thing. Right. And then you're going to have a riled up base on the other side. Right. And what we really do need is people to hold their own parties accountable. That's the only thing you're going to get. The only time you're going to get any real change is if people actually do have some kind of ethic or some kind of value that they actually do put into the candidate they support, and hold their feet to the fire. Otherwise, this is the exact consequence. This election is the exact consequence of us not doing that in the first place. So, I mean, at this point, we really have nobody to blame but ourselves as far as the fact that we don't like either one of these two candidates.
Sure. Yeah, I like to say sometimes people get really up in arms about people not voting. They say voting is our most important tool, you know.
Duty tool, yeah.
Duty tool. We fought so hard for it. It's so, you know, so important. But like I said, I vote with my dollars. I think that's way more of a vote. And also giving credence to these people. I've heard people many times this election cycle, people talking about the lesser of two evils. And these are like Christians and stuff that I'm talking about. So they're saying they're going to go vote for evil. Isn't that supposed to be, what we're not, especially, in a Christian country, we shouldn't be just saying, okay, we'll take it because, there's nothing better. There is better.
Right. Well, and that's, again, back to what we were talking about last night. I think that's where I have accepted and totally embraced the idea of voluntarism and anarcho-capitalism and consensualism, because their philosophy, their moral philosophy, is more consistent than any other type of ideology or a party ideology or anything. The consistency is so much more. And that's where I think a lot of people don't understand it for a while. But once you really start to understand the concept, yeah, you can't be consistent in your life. I have a mortgage. I pay my taxes and everything. You can't be consistent in everything, but you can really be aware of it and try to do your best. If you can't really live in any other system, then yeah, sure, I could move. I could leave the country. I could go somewhere else, but it's not the plan. I don't want to do that. I don't want to give up my country. I think there's something better to fight for, better society and better system to fight for. So, that's where I think the consistency needs to stay. And Jim, I think you would agree with that, is that this ideology is a little bit more consistent than what we're seeing in this current election and this current selection process.
Yeah, it's incredibly consistent. That's the principles behind liberty. Just don't hit, don't steal, and keep your word.
Right. Yep.
It's pretty simple.
Yep.
But everybody says, well, if I can have this one thing, then I can sacrifice my morals over here.
Yeah.
And that's
for safety.
That's not right.
If you want to keep
for safety, for free stuff, for anything.
Yeah.
I want a thing. I don't want to pay for the thing, so I'm going to vote to have money taken from my neighbors to pay for the thing, whatever it be.
Right.
Yep.
Wars,
walls, welfare, doesn't matter.
Right.
And if you want a thing, you should pay for the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really that simple. Just pay for your thing.
Right.
That's cool. You can have the thing, just pay for it.
Right. It is a simple concept. I don't know much actually, but I know enough and I understand the simple concept enough to know that it's not an ideology or philosophy or principle, any of it, that I'm going to ever go change my mind on. So let's get back to the election a little bit here. I think what's really interesting, I said we were going to talk a little bit about foreign policy. What's really interesting is, and again, go to James Corbett if you want to check out some really good stuff. He does some really good recent work here about how the special interests, any of the big war profiteers, any of these big businesses that are in bed with the government, and despite who wins, Trump or Clinton, we are going to be at perpetual war still. And a lot of people think Trump might change it. He might stop a little bit of hurt, but I don't think he's going to be able to stop what is the war profiteers, and the thing about it is that people need to understand there's two types of profiteers or two types of war profiteers. Those who gain the profit of control and those who gain the profit of money. And the government is on both sides. They get the money, they make a lot of fucking money from it, and they also get a lot of control from it. So I think that's one thing that's very interesting. There's a lot of special interests on both sides right now, on Trump and Clinton. Clinton she has a whole lot more. She has most of all the big banks, most of all the big companies that supply all the weapons and missiles and all this other stuff behind her. Trump has some. He does have some. He's got some pretty big connections behind him. And we could pull them up. We could pull up some stuff. I would urge the audience more than anything to please go do the research yourself. The information is out there. I think it's a dangerous time we're living in with either psychopath in the Oval Office. Jamal, would you agree for the most part? Have you done the research as far as some of the big names behind both candidates?
I don't know if you caught the latest Julian Assange interview. When they kind of asked him, you know, like about Trump and Hillary, and you know, basically what's the difference between the two of them. I think he summed it up great by saying, you know, Hillary is that centralized figure that is connected with Wall Street, the banks, the military-industrial complex, these, you know, these other countries, everything. She is that center cog in that whole thing. So I think she's capable of getting a lot more done. That's going to be horrible. Trump, on the other hand, I think he's just as capable, and I think if he did get elected, what's the first thing that's going to happen? He's going to have people calling him up and knocking on his door and trying to establish those kind of connections too, because those people have their interests to look for to maintain.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't trust the particular candidates to come in and actually clean something up. They have to keep their integrity clean. I don't think either one of them has integrity. And my concern really is, like you said, the contractors and all those things, those are already established under Clinton, and that's why that's the person that I fear the most in this election. That's not
and it's greatly documented.
Yeah, that's not a go ahead and vote for Trump thing at all. If you're going to vote, make sure you're voting for somebody that's aligned with your beliefs at least, and let's have a fair election.
And look into them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Do we have Mike on?
He keeps popping in and out. Mike, you there?
Not quite yet. That's all right. That's all right. We'll hopefully we'll get Mike on in a little bit here. You know, Leif and I did a little bit of research last night, and Frankie, we did a little bit of research last night, and it's very interesting, some of the connections behind Trump. Does it mean anything? Does it mean, no, to me right now at this point it doesn't. Does it mean anything with the connections behind Clinton? Not really. Not until they get into office, either one gets into power, because that's when the behind the scenes will really start taking place of the best way to govern, right? It doesn't really matter what party's in office, in power. They both are, they just want to, it's just different ways of governing.
A team and B team, I like to think.
Yeah.
At least for this election.
Sure. You know, it's just different ways of governing. I think that's a way that most people should look at this. And a lot of people have a hard time. They still think that we can save this country, and if we just go back to the Constitution and everything else. And I don't know. I'm having a hard time with that. I think we're a little far gone. I think the big money and special interests are just too much. And there's, not that I'm against big business and big money, but I'm just against the special interests that have malicious intent. And it's very clear right now that a lot of people are looking for a certain control. And, you know, we don't need to spend too much time on it. Jim, I know you did a little bit of research into it. It's just very interesting. You call it conspiracy or not, but some of these emails that WikiLeaks is presenting, and I want everybody to be aware, WikiLeaks has been around publishing for at least 10 years, coming up on 11 years or something, and they've never had anything wrong. Everything that has been fact-checked, and every email and published document has been 100% accurate all the time. And the stuff that they're leaking right now, as far as this spirit cooking and this occult, demonic, Satanist type of stuff that they're talking about, it's just very interesting that a lot of these people from the Clinton camp have different connections to some of this stuff. And it really makes you wonder, you know?
Not just connections, the emails are showing that they are involved in this.
Sure.
Yeah, having dinners with admitted Satanists.
Right.
This will scare a lot of people off and maybe think we're not credible, but there is some pretty interesting stuff behind the whole occult being behind parts of our government. There's
Sure.
something to it.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't like to talk about it too much because there is speculation there.
Right.
There's just too much real proof of connections. That is
Sure.
the scary part.
Sure. And how much of a role does it actually play in the policy and governing that they do? And you know, you can speculate there too, right? That it's a lot or it's none at all, right? But I think it's just something very interesting that needs to be mentioned, right? And when you first hear about it, it's like, yeah, don't bother me with this shit. You're one of the first things you think of in an election cycle is, well, this is just rumors. This is just propaganda. People trying to get really demonize the candidate, right? But when you do the research, and especially when you have WikiLeaks releasing the stuff, it's hard to discredit it. It's hard to not talk about it, at least. Jamal, have you done any looking into this?
Oh, I've always been a history guy, and even like I love like occult type stuff. I don't do occult type stuff. I don't believe necessarily that it works or anything like that, but it's always been a fascinating thing. Just like other people's religions, I'll read up about them. I love just knowing about mythologies and everything. So occult is stuff that I have looked into. And you look throughout history, it's not that far-fetched to believe that people, especially people that are eclectic and eccentric or very high up in the elite echelon, it's not that hard to believe that their tastes would be a little different. Their excitements that they first, they go after because they already have everything else. Just try some other stuff. They have the opportunities to do that stuff. I don't care if they're into the occult stuff or anything like that. Sure. But like there's been the Hitler thing. Hitler was into the occult and stuff like that. Very into it. There was a leader who thought he had a bulletproof vest, magic shirt. I mean, there's people like that, and not to say that necessarily matters, but I mean, I think knowing whether your politician believes in this or that, and this that may not necessarily matter as far as the policies that they pass per se or they support, but like you kind of have to. I think you have to kind of know the people that represent you a little bit. You have to kind of know their mindset a little bit. I mean, we can go to pick strictly off of the bills that they pass, but those bills are named in a certain way to fool us unless we read that bills or actually research the results of these people's bills that they passed. And we have very little information to actually go off of these people. So I think to me, digging in and learning more about this kind of stuff is interesting. And I think knowing your enemy per se, sure, because you have to know their mindsets somehow. Sure. It kind of helps you figure stuff out. Not necessarily necessary, but it's always been an interesting thing to me. Right. I believe that the stuff does go on.
Right, sure. Mike, are you there?
Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Good. Wonderful. How are you, man?
Hey, good. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah. Are we coming through to you all right? We're not too loud, too quiet?
No, we're good. Sorry about the technical difficulties. This is honestly the first time I've had an interview since I moved into this new house. So trying to put everything together. And I think I had a software bug on my other computer, so I had to switch to this other device. Anyway, so good to be with you guys. And I've been listening the whole time. I know you wanted to quickly touch.
Oh, sorry you broke up there, man. We lost you, still lost you. Are you there?
He's there, just no audio.
Okay, no audio.
When you get that figured out, jump right in.
Yeah, if you get that figured out, or when you get that figured out, to start talking again. Yeah, guys. So we got Michael Shanklin from Statism is Slavery, and he does a lot of great work. He's a very smart guy, well connected, and
there we go.
Okay, you're back.
We back?
Yeah.
All right, finally. Sorry about that, guys. So, yeah, like I said, a little bit of troubleshooting today. So I wanted to touch on the whole voting thing real quick. You guys, the initial question was, who are you voting for? Why? What does it matter, et cetera? So, here's my viewpoint. For those who don't know, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, propertarian, whatever you want to call it. So I believe that individuals have the right to do whatever they want as long as they don't infringe on the bodies or properties of others, period. End of story. How you homestead and everything like that, it's a different issue. We can go into that another day. But looking at it from that perspective, if it was truly about self-gratification in the political game, you know, I'm somebody who advocates advancing freedom on all levels, whatever you believe in. You know, I don't think that we're going to get freedom through the political process, but if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to try to hate on you or anything like that, right? So that's just where I come from on that. And if the political game was really about self-gratification, I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't do anything whatsoever, right? I mean, I would go and spend time with my family and my dog and work on my work and, you know, right? So when I look at the political game, I'm using it more as a tool to try to reach people who have never heard of the message of freedom and who will never probably Google it or anything like that. You know, you have all these groves of people just sitting in these debates and stuff like that. Maybe that's the only way we can reach some of them. You know, I think a lot of people, especially the younger crowd, will go out here on the internet, but some of these older people, you know, and some young, you have to actually go out to them in some of the environments that they're used to and comfortable in. So thinking of it from that perspective, I try to think, you know, what's the best strategy in the political game today? Obviously, there's no anarcho-capitalist person who stands steady to principle, who's out there fighting the good fight for us, and somebody we could, you know, hold up a thing, at least on the ballot today, right? So looking at it from that perspective, you only have 3 candidates who are really on the 50 ballot, all 50 ballots, and you really have a couple more candidates, but they're not on all 50. Looking at it from that perspective, we even have a political party who claims the title libertarian. In their platform, they talk about the non-aggression principle. Whether you're, you know, a consequentialist or deontological viewpoint, it doesn't matter. NAP, from a proprietarian perspective, at least, even consequentialists should be respected from the platform perspective. And so when we look at it from how do we support freedom the best, I have no fear of voting for somebody that I don't think will gain office, right? Because if I'm going to vote for Trump or Clinton, one of them might actually claim office, most likely Hillary at this point, but one of them's going to claim office, and then whoever I voted for, they are going to be able to go out and initiate use the initiation of violence on other people, and I will be an accomplice in that, what I consider a criminal act. And so looking at it from that perspective, saying, well, who's the person who's got no chance, who's kind of the protest vote, whether I support him 100% or not, you know, Gary Johnson's probably the closest one. Does that mean I'm going out there and wholeheartedly supporting him? No. But at the same time, I can see why people in the libertarian camp, even anarcho-capitalists, would see him as a way of reaching people in the mainstream, because he will, if he hits 5%, which he won't, but if he got close to it even, I think it will create more of a trend around the term libertarian. I think it'll create more traction. It'll bring people towards my work, right, and the stuff I'm doing. So then I can get them from the minarchist stage. You know, a lot of us came through Ron Paul. I did. Not that I was actually more of a libertarian than, but you know, he did play a role in making me an anarcho-capitalist, and I had to come through the minarchist perspective. Maybe we can't always expect people to make that serious wide gap jump. You know, not everybody can jump that canyon. Some people need crutches. Some people need airplanes and gliders, and you know, the rest of that to help get across that chasm. So I think that one of the things we can do is voting for those who have no chance of getting in power, who are probably going to be in the mainstream viewpoint, and who can actually bring people towards our viewpoint, and which is closest to my principles, which is the non-aggression principle. Obviously, Clinton and Trump, in my opinion, no matter what they talk, they're going to both increase government, you know, stop and frisk. I don't care what Trump says about the debt. He's gonna increase fiat currency. He's not trying to abolish the Fed. You know, we could go on for hours on this, but you know, at least Gary Johnson wants to abolish the Fed, wants to legalize marijuana across the board. He's talking about cutting taxes greatly. Nowhere near where I'm at, but probably the closest play in the game right now. So that, sorry to steal the last 5 minutes of the show, but you know, that's my 2 cents on that question.
No, you're good, man. No, and we got another 15 minutes at least that we're planning, so we can have a little bit of a discussion here. This is my cousin Leif, and there's Jamal.
Hey, Jamal. Hey, Leif.
This is Michael Shanklin. He just recently, last year, I guess I should say, moved to Rochester, and was it last year or the beginning of this year? Yeah,
it was September of 2015.
Okay, right on. So it's been a year.
Yep, just over here.
Cool, man. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway,
And
You know,
just to highlight on that, I'd like to also at the end of the show maybe talk about some of the events I'm going to be creating over the next year and a half. And also, the Facebook page, Statism is Slavery, we have almost 200,000 subscribers as of now, all from a anti-statist perspective. So lots of great support on that channel. If you guys can go out there on a Facebook, just type in Statism is Slavery and join us. We appreciate you in the fight.
Yeah, please. And I was hoping I was going to bring that up. I'd like you to promote some of the stuff you're thinking about and talking about here on your page and on your personal page as well. I know you've been trying to get some help and getting some people on board. So actually, let's do that. That would be a great time to do it right now. This Problem Reaction Solution Network. We talked about a lot of the problems. We've talked a lot about of the reactions that people have and the ignorance of the slaves in this statist society. What are some of the solutions that you're proposing?
Yeah, just to help people understand where I'm coming from, I don't think we're going to be able to achieve a free society tomorrow, probably not in a year, probably not even in 100 years, but we can start making great strides towards that goal. So what I mean by this is, education, I think, is very key right now. We have to continue to bust the myth of good authoritarianism or anything like that, whatever kind of control structure that people have, forced hierarchy. That is something that we really need to continue to educate on. So from the education front, write your books, create the resource center, have people create a place where people want to come and feel empowered and feel respected and can really learn from you and take that knowledge to others and help spread that. So that's one of the key things there. That's where statism slavery comes in. I do think that things like Pork Fest are a great idea, although they might not always have the most focal of aims, right? It's kind of like you're at a dartboard and they continue to have very good accuracy, right? But the precision's off, I don't know if you know that dichotomy description, but anyway, so I think that creating these types of events helps with the networking, right? When in the business world, I do a lot of B2B work for consulting and strategic planning, and we have to go to a lot of these organizational events, right? I'm in the utility industry, and so we deal mostly with the natural gas industry, but also with water and oil and a variety of other energy sources. And we have to go out to events. And so one of the things I'd like to do over the next year and a half, we're planning right now for a place in Iowa or near the Minnesota border of Iowa to have a anarcho-capitalist event where I feel I can, on the first go around in 2018, get 1,000+ people and make it even bigger than Pork Fest. Blow this up. We have lots of connections, and if we could create a little bit of momentum, the minarchists have really been able to do that with Pork Fest. Well, let's create something in the middle of the country, not all the way up in the northeast. No offense to them, maybe it's great for those people in that locality, but I think it would be more generally accepted. People from Canada could even come, people from Mexico. So you'd have people all across the United States where it'd be much more accessible within 1,000 miles of most people. And so we could build up a thing where you have that agora spirit, right? Where you have that agorism, where you have that black market transactions. I don't want to market it that way, but we all know that's going to happen, right? That's one of the end goals. And so not to attract the DEA and the ATF, et cetera, but to have something like that where we can connect, where we can network, where we can do our trade and barter. And I think that's going to help us create societies, right? I mean, naturally, people will just want to form together. I'm not a forced segregationist, but I'm also not an anti people who want to voluntarily segregate. I don't personally. I like being around statists and other skin colors and all. To me, it doesn't matter, right? But some people want that, and I think you could even have more of that built around, and there's nothing wrong with this, and you can have black people and gays and all that stuff around the whole idea of an anarcho-capitalist society. So, I think Anarchapulco down in Mexico, I think that was kind of like putting the cart before the horse, right? I like it, and you have to, it's kind of a market transaction in the sense that we tried something and we can learn from it, right? But at the same time, it was kind of a little early and it was kind of a little far away. Most anarchists aren't in Mexico or in Latin America, So, especially people like us, the ANCAP tinge or voluntarist, whether even ANCAP or not is a different story, but the whole voluntarist tinge itself. So I think some of those things are the greatest things we do. But I think to you, honestly, and this is what I think has created the most turmoil when I say this, is we're not going to really see a free society until we hit space. That's just my 2 cents. I think that the Earth is pretty locked down by the statist mentality. and that we're going to have technology really, I'm cheering on SpaceX, trust me, because we need something over the next, 200 to 500 years to come about where we can have societies and we can just escape. We can, if the status barriers of the universe go out, we can just outrun them farther, right? I mean, this is the final frontier, and thank God it's not too final, right? It goes on and on and on, and we can reach out and escape the status worst case scenario. So maybe go to other planets and then create those. It's going to be really hard for me to visualize a free society over the next 1,000 years on planet Earth.
Sure. Well, and real quick, Mike, I like exactly where you're going with that, because I agree. I follow Elon Musk and SpaceX and what they're doing, and I'm a little more optimistic. Maybe not to say that you're not optimistic, because I know you sure are. But
some people say it'll never come.
Right.
So I still think it will.
I think that possibility is it's an exponential growth. It's something that's not a linear growth. You put on a graph, and not only are people waking up in mass droves, but with technology, we can go to a place where, man, I think the possibilities are endless. And I totally agree. That would be a really ideal scenario. You have different companies that create options for people to, like you said, escape, right? And
think about this. And then once we hit space and people see these thriving communities, maybe on other planets, maybe just out in space stations or whatever, and they see an anarcho-capitalist society working, and technology has made it so there's less scarcity, et cetera, it'll be easier to break down those authoritarian constraints that are plugging us down today, right? Like a dependency towards fossil fuels and all that stuff. It does create a big regulatory capture process for the government. All these the regulation system itself makes people feel like, oh, without it, we would be all dead or something like that. But once everybody has their own solar cells and stuff, in the year 3000 or whatever, you're not going to have that grid like you do today, and all the politicians trying to oligopolize, if not monopolize it, right? So, I agree with you on that.
Right, and I think I guess the main thing I wanted to say is I think that I'm really hoping not 200 to 500 years from now. I'm hoping within the next. So I did the math the other day. My son was born in 2015. By the time the year 2100 comes, he'll be 85. So ideally, with technology and medical advancements, he'll still be alive and well. And ideally, with medical advancements, I'll still be alive. That would be great.
Right.
I'm hoping by that time that it'll be possible. 85 years from now, that would be really ideal, where there's businesses that say, "Hey, fuck this! I'm going to Mars, and I'm creating an anarcho-capitalist society, and we got to figure it out."
Yeah, and I'm not writing that off. I'm just, if I had to take a guess, if I was putting my money where my mouth is, I would say 500 years in space. But who knows?
Right. Who knows? And that's just
it could be
speculation at this point.
And especially as some of the older generations die out over the next 40 years, those are the people who are really stuck in authoritarianism. Of the younger generation, they see through this process. They know politicians are corrupt. They realize that this is bullshit, that marijuana should be legalized, that most wars are shitty, et cetera, that their aggression is not defensive. People who are younger aren't as brainwashed into it. And of course, it's because we have the internet today. When you imagine this, 80 years ago, if you had a question when you were a 10-year-old, who did you ask? You asked your parents, or you asked your grandparents, or a friend, right? Today, 90% of kids are going to Google. And they're just bypassing the bias of the previous generations and going towards a more factual base. Not that the internet's always factual, but I think it can be often more factual, and that it's at least a place that we know has the answers, if not hard to find, right? The correct answers. Whereas your parents, many of the times, the older generations, especially politically and philosophically, are just very lost. They're out in the cornfield.
Right. Yeah, you're 100% right. I'd like to ask real quick, Jamal or Leif, do you guys have any questions for Mike? Just to kind of put you on the spot.
I want to touch on the space thing a little bit, because I have a lot of some statist friends that believe that because of government is the only way we're going to be able to go to space. We need that to be funded by the government, and they also have this utopian idea that somehow we're going to have like that Star Trek world where everybody on Earth is under a centralized one government, and then we're going to start exploring space and all that stuff. And I don't see it happening that way, but what do you say to those people that say that government is the one that's going to make this happen, or needs to be in control of this process?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great question. These are the things we got to do. We got to take these serious objections. This is just like sales, right? You take serious objections and you don't bypass them. You hit them straight on and you give them the straight answers. And I think this is exactly what we have to do. It's a great question. So what I would say to somebody who says, well, we need the government to be able to have technology, et cetera, look at school buses for a second. How much technological change is there from a school bus 50 years ago to today? It's almost nothing. And it's the same thing when you look at the space station. And when the same thing when you look at the space shuttle itself. Not much technological advancement has occurred, whereas when you look at SpaceX, this company, yes, they still get government subsidies, and that's a whole problem as well, but they could almost be self-funded, and I think they would be in a truly free market society, especially with the loads that they do to for it's not just always into space. It's sometimes the upper atmosphere, satellite communications, etc. So they work with companies like DirecTV and stuff like that. So you have other incentives in the natural market process, and it's the same thing. If you have ever seen the show Family Guy, they have an episode once where they go back and religion never existed, and like there's flying cars and crap everywhere in today's world. If you just came back to today, right? And so I envision the same thing from an anarcho-capitalist society. If you can think of how long humanity was trapped in the Malthusian trap before the Industrial Revolution, where farming subsistence was how you made your day for 98% of the population. Today only takes 2% of the population to farm. Had we never had the statist regimes and all of the regulatory capture and all of the taxes and special interest groups and lobbying, et cetera, we would have already had the technological advancement from the market maybe thousands of years ago, right? We could have had everything we had now before Jesus books were written about Jesus, right? You know what I mean? So this humanity's always had the ability. We just never had the discovery of these inventions, right? Because every invention is a discovery, but not every discovery is an invention, right? So when I look at it, I say to them, listen, there's plenty of things in the real world. When you look at microwaves, look at the car. Right? The car itself is a perfect example. People are worried because you can't have a road without government. Well, it takes hardly any work to come up with how to make a road. Try updating a car every year. You know how many engineers that takes? How many business executives trying to get those engineers to work together properly? That is a very difficult, in-depth task that the state obviously can't even do. The state can't even produce a ham sandwich efficiently, let alone the bread for the ham sandwich, right? Why do we think that they can do all this other technological advancement? So where we have seen the greatest leaps of technology, the USB drive has saved more trees than Greenpeace ever will, right? This is the reality of the world. Is technological advancement comes from the market, comes from market demand. And sure, we might not have the huge demand to have a space station tomorrow, but it's these small incremental tasks and technological advancements which finally lead to the final end product good, which is available, which is tangible, which is possible. So, I don't want to go back to a religious invisible hand or anything like that, but we can look at real life examples today. Let's keep it tangible. Let's keep it consequential. Let's keep it from a perspective of which we can look at empirical evidence today and say all the technological advancements, cars, microwaves, airplanes, etc., has not come from government bureaucrats, but has come just from the opposite, from the private sector and competition and choice.
Sure. I totally agree. I think you're 100% right. I want to get Jim and Leif both to ask you a question here. Jim, if you could think of one that you'd like to ask him, Leif, off the top of your head. Something, Mike is, obviously getting to understand of who he's about, what he's about. He runs a Facebook page called Statism and Slavery. Do you have any question at all for him on anything as far as the anarcho-capitalist movement, the idea, how to talk to people, anything at all? There's something.
Yeah, so I got something. So obviously, when you bring up these things, people have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions about these types of things. I've been working slowly to get the answers to different people and books and whatnot. So I guess one of the things that people will say is who is going to stop somebody from, for one thing, breaking into my house and killing or raping me, and then the other one that I get is how do we actually there's a lot of questions, but like let's say for the police, how does that work out? And also, the other big one is how do we stop companies from taking down too many trees? How do we regulate by ourselves? Which
let's start with one and we'll move on to the others. Good questions. I mean, these are all things we need to talk about, right? So let's start with defense first, right? Because when we talk about police, what anarcho-capitalists are really trying to say when we're looking at a free society is who are the protectors, right? Who are the defenders? How do we have a defense? Whereas most people think police is just kind of like, and then this is how the police are. They go around in the world and do whatever the state says. So they're kind of like state crony follower zombies, where just here's a law, do it. It doesn't matter whether it's defense or not, right? So what we say is from an anarcho-capitalist perspective is stop the funding of the police system, right? So stop this system that just goes out there and monopolizes all defense agencies, right? And imagine right now, and this happens in many third world countries, the government will claim they'll nationalize all bread production, like in Egypt years ago, right? 40 years ago. And what happened? Bread production went to shit, I mean, obviously, anybody who understands any economics can realize when you centralize production to a government, it's just going to go to crap, And so that's what happened, obviously. And this is the same theory that goes with police. So they've monopolized all the bread producers. It's illegal to produce bread. Well, it's the same thing with defense. If I can't go out there and choose my own defense agency right now, and this is a great thing, Dale Brown over in Detroit, he has his risk deferment management system. It's basically like a police system, but it only defends people. Right, so it doesn't go out there and enforce marijuana laws. It doesn't go out there and if you're being murdered, it'll come to you. You call them and they come. And what's great is every time that two people subscribe to his service, and this is when Detroit, when you were trying to call police and you'd be on a 2-hour wait. Well, if you paid this guy like $18 a week, he would back you up, and if you had a problem, he'd come to you. And he always had a crew there, so he had a whole team, and they were taught defensive skills only, right? So this is the whole thing. People say you're going to privatize the state. No, you can't privatize the initiation of violence, right? You can only end the initiation of violence and then legitimize and legalize defense. That's all it is. So the key here is that you could have a different ways to fund these services, right? It's not always a subscription. Some fire departments donation based. You also see it that where it could be a fee based. So, like a tow truck. You don't always just pay $20 a month. Some people do for AAA, but some people just say, you know what, I'll pay the $80 this month to get my tow truck instead of paying the AAA, the $80 for the year. I'll take the risk or pay the $100. Maybe I'll pay an extra $20, but that's your choice, right? So you can have a different ways of funding the defense structure. You can have donation. Once again, you can have it on a subscription. You can have it on a fee based. Of the state's monopoly on defense services, a lot of these things would naturally, once Egypt ended the monopoly on bread production, all these bread producers started popping back up, right? And bread quality went up and price went down. That's what happened. So we're just trapped right now to a anti-defense system, a proprietarian infringing property protector, supposedly, which is the most asinine thing you could ever mention, right? What was your second question? It was
the other one is kind of.
Let me finish. Think of that real quick. I also wanted to say too. Think about this too. People are like, "Well, how efficient would that be?" Well, I'll tell you right now. Let's look at today's system of defense, supposed defense with the police. A lot of their time is wasted on victimless crimes that shouldn't even be crimes. Wasted on since they're a monopoly. It's not like we have strong to come in here and say they're wasting time at the donut factory for 3 hours a day when they should be out chasing that murderer, right? If you have competition from different agencies, they would all be competing to see who can catch the murderer first, right? Correctly and accurately, because if they catch somebody and he's wrong, that can actually go against their company too and hurt stock price, etc. So they have an incentive to try to produce the best market results in the least amount of time at the lowest price, whereas today's monopoly police system has none of those incentive structures. So if I'm a criminal in today's system, I'm actually feeling more comfortable under statism. I feel like they're so inefficient. I can go out there and rob and kill and steal and get away with it greater than I would if the resources weren't dwindled and we had a true system based around defensive
that's a great way to put it as well. You're as a criminal, you probably feel a little bit more comfortable in this system.
I want to kind of throw in also I've looked into the people in Detroit doing the private security, and they've been doing good. And one big difference is if they were to shoot somebody or kill somebody, they would actually have to go to court for it. They would actually be liable for that. They can't.
Yeah. They don't have immunity like the system, right?
Yeah,
the sovereign immunity wouldn't exist. That's correct. Yep, you're absolutely right.
What was your other question?
Good point.
Basically on the lines of environmental protection, and who would do that? I mean, I have a few answers for that too, but I'd like to know your standpoint. Like, who's going to stop them from putting out every tree? Who's going to stop them from putting chemicals in the river? That kind of thing.
Right. So a couple things to mention here. Let's first look at it from the state's perspective today, right? Whenever we see anti-poaching laws in Africa, or we see the rainforest trying to be protected in Brazil, etc. Well, the Brazilian government owns like 85, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's around the 85% mark of the rainforest. And what they are able to do is slowly sell it off to these companies throughout the years. They're the ones who get the direct profits from it. The government does. And it never goes back to the people or the civilization outside the society, right? If it does, it's a very long, this funny thing is that government's the real trickle down thing. You know, everybody talks about the free market being trickle down. But anyway, so what I see today is a lot of government, you know, the U.S. military being the #1 polluter out of all U.S. citizens, including corporations, et cetera. They produce the most waste because of all the tanks, you know, the bombers, et cetera. I mean, there's so much environmental hazards that they produce. It's unreal. In fact, the Department of Defense actually got in trouble with the EPA 30 years ago. Dr. Mary Ruwart wrote a great article about this in Healing Our World. And it was talking about how because they had sovereign immunity, they never had to pay back the $6 billion fine that they had to do. And nobody went to jail for it, of course, you know, so they can just get away with destroying the environment, whereas pointing the finger at all of us because we threw, you know, an aluminum beer can in a forest fire or something like that, right? So, you know what I'm getting at here. So just from that perspective, it ticks me off that government is one of the biggest polluters today. Every time that they try to create a regulation, it usually ends up harming people and creating more oligopolization of industry, which then these people can go and do the regulatory capture process, right? So regulatory capture is really at the root of the environmental problem, but we also have to look at it from a propertarian perspective as well. So I don't want to look at it just from how the state's bad. Let's look at how property rights protect the environment too, right? Today, and you could argue, yes, there's some homogeneous trees that are replanted, et cetera, but tree farming companies have to buy the land and the trees that are on the land. And when they cut down those trees, the value of the land is immediately reduced until they plant the seeds. And then every year, it's kind of like backwards depreciation. In this case, it's appreciation as the trees grow and grow and they become closer to becoming, you know, something you can turn into a paper product or whatever. They become more valuable, right, as they get closer to their end use. And so this is what's important is that they have an incentive to replant the trees that they have to buy, whereas places like the government with the rainforest, they cut down those trees. They don't own that land. They get it on a lease and they sell the land back to the government. That's the whole thing right there is a huge sham where they try to act like they're protecting the environment and they can sell it off to a bunch of, you know, people who are brainwashed into just believing government protects people, et cetera. And the whole while they're screwing us over while the people in the, this is another thing too. If you have property laws and somebody comes and pollutes on my land, they can't just dump trash on my land. If I didn't have the right to control my own property, it'd be tragedy of the commons. People can dump and take whatever they want, wherever they want. But the property rights make it so we can have exclusionary actions, right? I can stop somebody else from doing damaging behavior. And so this is what a lack of a individual property rights perspective does not bring you, that protection to protect the property. So how are you in a communal society supposed to protect property when 51% of the people want to pollute everywhere, right?
They can't.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Rivers is a big thing. Obviously, nobody's going to own the river.
Right. Well, you
can.
You could. Yeah, you sure could. Oh, Mike, did we lose you? Are you still there?
You may have lost Mike.
No.
No.
Well, the way I kind of envision is that communities would come together and they wouldn't buy from a company that is polluting in a river that they drink from. I would hope.
Right.
You know, that would be the one solution to
If you
it.
have transparency and open source, that's the great thing about the technology today is technology can provide a lot of these solutions with us with open source content.
Yeah.
And
There could be
especially
an
on
Angie's
the
list for
blockchain.
businesses.
Right.
There's big businesses.
There's a lot of solutions. There's a whole lot of solutions. Again, Mike, if you can hear us and you want to, whenever you get your audio back, I think we might have lost your audio. I don't know if you're trying to talk or not, but just jump right back in, please, if you can hear us. I was going to have Jim ask one more question before we wrap up for the episode today, the show, and we'll just maybe talk for another minute or two and see if we can get you back. Leif, what do you think about that answer? Are you satisfied? Because I know you're very much into wanting to protect people from. I don't want to put it that way, but you want people to be educated, and you want people to be aware of what's going into their bodies and their ecosystem and everything else. And I know that a lot of people want that, and a lot of people's answer is a centralized authority like government.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that I know that you are very interested in. That's something you are interested in as far as how to actually do it without a centralized authority or government.
Yeah.
Did you understood a lot of what he said there? And
yeah, that all made sense.
Sure. And it's a lot of work. That doesn't come without a lot of people being involved. That doesn't come without a lot of people being educated and understanding what's going on. All those things would come from people being more invested. If you don't have a government government always kills incentive and everything, whether they're making a ham sandwich or whether they're getting to acquiring a police force or whatever. They kill incentive in many different ways. If you don't have government involved, and it's people when they're not relying on something like a government or a centralized authority in anything, whether it's for protection, whether it's to get their food, whether it's to get their gas or energy, anything. If people aren't relying on the government, they would be able to figure it out, number one, on their own. Number two, they would have more incentive. When they're figuring it out on their own and they're actually more involved, the incentive is actually there for them to care, right? So that's where the education comes in. That's where the internet comes in. People can be informed and understand, learn things, and go on and educate themselves and find that Angie's List or that review site that is reputable. And again, there's, I think, the blockchain. This is a whole different topic, but the blockchain is presenting many different things. I urge audience members and anybody out here at this roundtable to go and check out Google Follow My Vote. It's a blockchain-based voting system. I just learned about it this past week. It's very interesting. Follow My Vote, and just Google that. It's a blockchain-based voting system. It's very, very interesting, but it's in the early stages. It's in the beta stages, if you will. There's a lot of work to be done. A lot of people don't understand this message, and you can apply it to anything. You can apply it to protection or environmental issues, and it's. I think the incentive is what is key for people to make this system work. Jim, what do you got?
Well, it looks like Mike's mic went out.
Oh,
I was going to ask him, even though that, a free society is way far off, even probably not even in our lifetime.
Yeah.
But how can we live to kind of avoid government? Not just, not pay our taxes, which somebody with a gun is going to come to your house. But, I personally grow some of my own food. There's the whole self-protection aspect.
Right.
I don't need to get into the personal details of how I do that.
Right, sure.
Or you guys too, but
Sure.
But how he, maybe how he's seen some people kind of either get off the grid or get away from kind of skirt statism and kind of get it out of your life, and talk on that aspect. So maybe I'll ask you guys. I know Jamal, you're kind of on the same procure your own food type of activities that. Some of the same ones that I'm in. I think you got a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what you do. Tell us your personal experience so other people might.
I have to thank my girlfriend Tracy about this too, because she's actually very supportive and as always as well like-minded about this whole thing. So it's not that we're not 100% self-sustainable, but there's still no excuse as to why each day we can't work towards increasing that. I mean, a lot of people save up for all kinds of things, whether it's vacations or nice cars or whatever. There's nothing in life is a guarantee. And if there is like another collapse, society, or not necessarily a society collapse, but an economical one, or where people lose jobs, there's lots of layoffs and stuff. The last thing I want to be doing, and this answers Jim's question about part of how you could not help government is also not to also be sucked into it. So if I can self-sustain myself, that's less I'm going to need that. And that's less likely my children are going to grow up under that, and so forth and so forth. So every day we try to figure out something, like what can we do to be more self-sustainable. So what happens if electricity goes out? Well, we got heat from a wood stove, which the EPA, if you see that's trying to control certain types of wood stoves now, as if people can't regulate that themselves. What's safe? Nobody wants to burn their own house down. People still do, no matter what. You bring a phone home from the store that could start a fire and blow your house down, or washing machine, as this one is. But we have chickens and ducks and turkeys, and we grow fruits and vegetables. We have a sizable garden, not a huge one. It's just it's a little bigger than just a starter one, but that it works. And each time we have storable foods, we have firearms for our own protections, we have all kinds of things that we try to figure out in different scenarios. Can we protect ourselves? Can we eat without food being in the grocery stores for a while, whatever? Because we've seen like the big storm that hit the East Coast, where people are eating out of the trash within one day.
Right.
We don't want to be that way. I mean, and so we don't want to be dependent on anybody else. And if you can not be dependent on anybody else and be self-sufficient, I think that's part of helps move towards this independence from a system that is always striving to make you dependent.
Sure. Sure. I think I'd like to. That's a good enough answer, Jim. Is that a good answer for you for a starter answer? I think we should end it right there. We're an hour and 15 minutes into it, and I think it would be a good time. We don't want to lose any audience members. Hopefully, some audience members stayed with us the whole duration of this show. And if not, you can check out the whole video on youtube.com/Problem Reaction Solution Network.
I'd like to throw in one thing.
Please.
So I'm guessing we do have Gary Johnson supporters out there. Not that I think he's probably best of three, but I want anybody who's kind of a believer that he's a purist, libertarian, anything like that, just simply YouTube Gary Johnson is not a libertarian. You'll hear him supporting Hillary Clinton, saying she'd make a great president. You'll hear him saying he's in favor of gun control, certain things that he probably shouldn't say if he was actually a libertarian. And this is just things he said. So, I mean, you can take it, you could say, well, he's a politician. Of course he says things that he doesn't do,
Right.
But I would like to throw that out there. Because I'm guessing, I don't want to make it seem like I'm just going to sit by while Gary Johnson doesn't have anything coming back on him.
He sure does have stuff coming back on him. And I think we all know that and have all seen stuff and understand exactly that. Like Mike said,
Well, I didn't know that until I actually looked into it.
Sure.
I thought he maybe was.
Like Mike said, he supports some good stuff. But also like we were talking about just last night, you made the mention of the fact that George Soros supports the legalization of weed, but it doesn't mean he's still a good guy just because he supports something that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to really quick on the side note, look into that. Please look into that. I think James Colbert again does some really good work on why George Soros and the big money is behind the legalization of weed. I want everybody to remember that if weed becomes legalized in our state of society, it's not a free market anymore. The government will have some sort of maybe limited, maybe not limited monopoly on it to a certain extent. I don't not support the legalization of weed. I do support it, but the people, please look into the big money that is also already trying to take advantage of the legalization of it as well. There's a lot of big money on both sides.
And we'll just take the example of George Soros. He was taken by by an acquaintance of the family, I believe, out of Nazi Germany, and then he worked, and he worked for the Nazis, evicting people from homes. He was a child.
Taking Jewish property. And he's on record admitting that he doesn't feel guilty for it because if it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else. And those are his own words.
Sure. Yeah, there's no doubt. And
he's a classic double-sider.
We're certainly going to have to get back to get another show going here soon and talk about this stuff in more detail. And we got a lot we could talk about. Maybe sometime next week or in the next couple weeks here, and we'll see how everybody's reaction is after the election. It is Sunday, November 6th, and remember the 6th of November. I know it's supposed to be the 5th of November, but this is an epic podcast, and I want to thank Jim, our producer and administrator of Problem Reaction Solution Network, and Jamal, our editor of Problem Reaction Solution Network, and then Leif Hamreed, aka the Northern Groove. You can find his glasswork on the Northern Groove Facebook page. Just look up Northern Groove. He also sells glass and different types of jewelry, and he's a very good artist. And he is our new analyst on Problem Reaction Solution Facebook page. So I'd like everybody to please share this with your friends. Next time, maybe we'll do a live stream on Facebook as well. We'll see what happens. Again, thank you, everybody. Jim, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming in, guys.
And,
Thank you, Michael.
We got to have our traditional
Thanks, Mike.
outro here, Jim.
I don't remember my traditional outro.
All right, I'll do it for you. Problem Reaction Solution Network. Guys, thank you all very much. Grow a garden, encrypt your phone, practice freedom, and be excellent to each other.